Hello and welcome back. In this video, I will be continuing the subject of idolatry. My first video in the series, I discussed the Asherah poles and ancient and modern day phallic symbols. We also took a look at Baal worship in part 2. In this video, we will take a look at how God eventually rejected his nation of Israel because of the sin of idolatry. Okay, before we get into this video, I think it's necessary to discuss the history of Israel, where the 12 tribes of Israel came from, and how they developed. So we're going to start way back at the beginning with Abraham. Abraham was the founding father of the Jewish nation of Israel. He was a man of great faith and obedience to the will of God. His name in Hebrew means father of a multitude. Originally called Abram, or exalted father, Yahweh changed his name to Abraham as a symbol of the covenant promise to multiply his descendants into a great nation that God would call his own. Prior to this, God had already visited Abraham when he was 75 years old, promising to bless him and make his offspring into an abundant nation of people. All Abraham had to do was obey God and do what God told him to do. This is mentioned in Genesis chapter 12. Let's read that together. It says, "Now Yahweh said to Abram, Get out of your country and from your relatives and from your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse the one who curses you, and all the clans of the earth will be blessed in you." So Abram went as Yahweh had told him to. Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. Abraham took Sarai his wife, Lot his brother's son, all their possessions they had accumulated, and the souls whom they had acquired in Haran, and they went to go into the land of Canaan. This marked the beginning of the covenant God established with Abraham. It was also Abraham's first test from God, since he had his wife Sarai, later changed to Sarah, were still without children. Abraham demonstrated remarkable faith and trust, immediately leaving his home and his clan the moment God called him to the unknown territory of Canaan. Abraham was born in the city of Ur of the Chaldeans, present-day Iraq. He traveled 500 miles to Haran, now southeast Turkey, with his family and stayed there until his father's death. When God called Abraham, he moved 400 miles south to the land of Canaan and lived there most of the rest of his days. In this communication from God to Abram, we discover three distinctive promises, and we may refer to these three as the land promise, number 1, the nation promise, number 2, and third, the spiritual promise. The land promise, God said in Genesis 12:1, "A land that I will show you." And in Genesis 12:2, Yahweh appeared to Abram and said, "To your descendants I will give this land." So a land would be given to the descendants of Abram. That's pretty much the essence of the first promise. The second promise, a great nation would come from Abraham. God fulfilled the second promise when he formed a great nation from the descendants of Abraham. The following passages show the fulfillment of the second promise. In Genesis 46, verse 3, God spoke to Israel, the man also called Jacob, and God said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there." This is what God said to Abraham's grandson Jacob, later called Israel, and the descendants of Abraham were called the children of Israel, or Israelites, who went down to Egypt as the family of Joseph, but they came out of Egypt a great nation. Already in Genesis, Exodus, and Deuteronomy, there are these statements leaving no doubt when God formed the Jewish nation. He was fulfilling his promise to Abraham, multiplying his seed into a great nation. Also in Genesis chapter 22, God promised that Abraham's seed would become like the stars of heaven. Let's read that in Genesis 22:15. The angel of Yahweh called to Abraham a second time out of the heaven and said, "I have sworn by myself, says Yahweh, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your only son, that I will bless you, yes, bless you, and I will make your seed many, Yes, many like the stars of the heavens, and like the sand that is on the seashore. And your seed will possess the gate of his enemies. In your seed all the nations of the earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. The New Testament also speaks about this in Hebrews chapter 11. It was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and go to another land that God would give him as his inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going, and even when he reached the land God promised him, he lived there by faith, for he was like a foreigner living in tents. And so did Isaac and Jacob, who inherited the same promise. It was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child, though she was barren and was too old. She believed that God would keep his promise. Abraham, at the age of 100 years, and Sarah, at the old age of 90 years, had the son of promise, whom they called Isaac. Isaac, which in Hebrew means laughter, because he was miraculously born to a joyful Abraham and Sarah when they were too old to have children. Later, Abraham ordered Isaac, his son, to take a wife among the daughters of Laban, his mother's brother. Eventually, Isaac married Rebekah about 2025 BC. They eventually had twin boys, Esau and Jacob, and Jacob's name was eventually changed to Israel by God. And so a whole nation came from this one man Abraham, who was as good as dead, a nation with so many people that, like the stars in the sky and the sands on the seashore, there is no way to count them. The third promise, called the spiritual promise, the Bible says, all the families of the earth shall be blessed through Abraham. Now in this third promise, the statement is not confined to an immediate single family or a single nation, but all of the families of the earth. This earthly blessing is referring to Jesus Christ, as shown in Acts chapter 3. Starting in verse 24, it says, yes, all the prophets from Samuel and those who follow, as many as have spoken, have also foretold these days. You are sons of the prophets and of the covenant which God made with our fathers, saying to Abraham, and in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Verse 26, to you first God had raised up his servant Jesus, sent him to bless you, in turning away every one of you from your iniquities. So Jesus came from the nation of Israel, and specifically from the tribe of Judah. Interestingly, all kings of Israel came from the tribe of Judah. Jesus is the King of all the world, and all mankind will be blessed through Jesus during the 1,000-year millennial reign when all mankind will be restored. So God kept his promise to Abraham when he said, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Here is a chart showing the 12 sons of Israel from where the 12-tribe nation of Israel came. Here in the chart you can see it shows on the left the list of the mothers and the sons they bore. The first son is Reuben, second son Simeon, then Levi, then Judah, who were born from Leah. Bilhah was Rachel's handmaiden, gave birth to Dan and Naphtali. Zilpah, Leah's handmaiden, gave birth to Gad and Asher. Leah gave birth to Issachar and Zebulun, while Rachel gave birth to Joseph and Benjamin. So these are the names of the 12 sons from the 12 tribes of Israel. The name Israel comes from Jacob when his name was changed. Let's read about that account in Genesis chapter 32. The same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and everything else that he had, and Jacob was left alone. And the man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for the day has broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And he said to him, what is your name? And he replied, Jacob. Then he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh. So Jacob wrestled with an angel. Angels often appeared as men in physical form in the Old Testament. He wrestled with the angel because he wanted a blessing from God. The meaning of Israel is he who struggles with God. Jacob said he saw God, but the Bible says no one can see God and yet live, so we know that this was an angel of God that blessed him. It was God's will that Jacob be renamed Israel. Jacob's descendants became known as the Israelites, eventually forming the 12 tribes of Israel and later the kingdom of Israel. Here's a picture of the 12 sons of Israel. Levi's descendants did not receive a territory for themselves. Instead, they became priests and had several cities scattered throughout all of Israel. So the Levites weren't counted as part of the 12 tribes. Also, Joseph's tribe was divided in two. Jacob had adopted Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, eventually giving Joseph a double portion for his faithfulness in saving the family from the famine in Egypt. So the total tribes were counted as 12. After the ancient Israelites left Egypt and came out of slavery, God commanded Moses to have them set up their wilderness camp in a specific way. The encampment layout of the tribes of Israel was set up according to groups of tribes placed together on each of the camp's 4 sides mentioned in Numbers chapter 2. That's a very good chapter if you want to take time to read the whole thing. It shows how specifically Yahweh had them lay their camp. You can see from this picture here, this is how God wanted them to set their camp up. The camps of Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun were located on the eastern side of the tabernacle and were collectively under Judah's standard. The camps of Reuben, Simeon, and Gad were placed together on the southern side of the tabernacle and were collectively under Reuben's standard. The camps of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin were located on the western side of the tabernacle and were collectively under Ephraim's standard. The camps of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali were placed together on the northern side of the tabernacle and were collectively under Dan's standard. The tribe of Levi was chosen by God to serve as priests, and they were placed together around the tabernacle, with the clan of Gershon on the west behind the tent of meeting, the clan of Merari in the north, the clan of Kohath in the south, with Moses and Aaron and his 2 living sons in the east in front of the tent of meeting. Also, God gave Moses specific instructions as to how to march through the wilderness and how they were to set up their camp. The two were closely intertwined as they allowed for a speedy setup and breakdown for moving. When the cloudy pillar arose from the tabernacle, it was the divine signal for them to start packing and move to the next place God wanted them to go. So Yahweh literally directed his people when and how to move. Yahweh was very specific also in how he wanted the Israelite camps to march through the desert. This is also described in Numbers chapter 2. When the nation was on the move, here was their marching order. So they were facing east here, as you can see here. The Levites marched first as they carried the Ark of the Covenant. The cloudy pillar went before them as a guide. When the cloud gave the signal, the Levites who carried it moved forward simultaneously. Then the priests used the silver trumpets to blow an alarm for each of the divisions when it was their time to move forward. So this moving was all very, very organized by Yahweh. So the Levites started the march bearing the Ark of the Covenant. You can read about this in Numbers chapter 4. Followed by the army of Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and the Merarites was a family of priests, and they followed with 4 wagons drawn by 8 oxen, bearing the boards, bars, pillars, and sockets of the tabernacle, and the court pillars and their sockets. Also the Gershonites was a priest family. They had the 2 wagons drawn by 4 oxen, bearing the curtains, coverings, and hangings of the tabernacle and the hangings of the court. Following them was the army of Reuben, Simeon, and Gad, and the Kohathites, another priest family, carried the sacred furniture of the sanctuary of the court. Following them was the army of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. And last, the army of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali took up the rear. So the nation marched through the desert for 40 years in this order as they were led by the fiery cloud of Yahweh through the wilderness as it guarded, lighted, and protected them. Each family and tribe proudly displayed their banners and ensigns as they marched. What an impressive sight that must have been to witness the nation on the move by other nations. The Bible does not say why the tribes were placed in their order, but it seems that they all must have felt they had an important role to play. They were interspersed between and around the pieces that made up the tabernacle, as I described. Since there were 3 tribes that camped together in sections of 4, they were probably related to one another by either blood, affection, or other ties. God arranged things so that peace, harmony, and unity would be promoted between them. The Bible says that there were 600,000 fighting men in the Exodus from Egypt. On this evidence, scholars say that the total number of Israelites in the desert would have been approximately 2.5 million, including the priestly class, women and children, plus their livestock that came with them as they traveled. God made each individual in the camp important by giving them a specific job to do. Each person in the wilderness had to work together in harmony to get the giant task accomplished. If they had just decided to rebel and do their own thing, they would have certainly perished in the desert without God's guidance. In Numbers chapter 2, God said that they should camp according to their standards and banners of their fathers' houses. In chapter 2, verse 1, it says, Yahweh spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, The children of Israel are to encamp every man by his own standard with the banners of their fathers' houses. At a distance from the tent of meeting, they are to encamp around it. Here's a picture of what the 12 banners looked like. Each tribe was represented by its banner with a symbol that described the qualities of each tribe. For example, the most famous symbol belongs to the tribe of Judah, which displayed a lion on its shield. This tribe became the most powerful and constituted the kingdom of Judah. The lion is the symbol of strength. Time doesn't permit me to go into all the symbolic meanings of each banner, but maybe this is something you could do in your own time in your personal study. It's a very interesting study to learn about each banner and what they represented. After the 40 years of wandering in the desert, Yahweh gave his people, the Israelites, the land of Canaan as their inheritance. Here's a picture of the land of Canaan once the Israelites had settled into the land. You can see how the tribes were laid out. You see the tribe of Simeon in the south, then Judah, then Reuben, Gad, Ephraim, and Dan, Manasseh. And you can see all the tribes listed there. So this is how God laid them out, told them to set up the nation. So that's pretty much how the 12 tribes of Israel developed over time from Egypt and their march through the desert for 40 years and finally becoming a nation. The 12 tribes of Israel were at one time united. So what caused the split between the 12 tribes of Israel into the 10 tribes in the north and the 2 tribes in the south? What was it that caused that division? Well, quite simply, it was idolatry that caused this separation. It all started with King Solomon. As I mentioned in my first video on idolatry, he had a weakness for women, which resulted in the detriment of both himself and his kingdom. He loved many strange Gentile women and married heathen wives against God's counsel. These marriages caused him to turn his heart away from following the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh, only to follow the gods of the nations. As a result of Solomon's transgression, God split the kingdom of Israel into the northern and southern parts, leaving only 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, and the southern kingdom to his son Rehoboam. Rehoboam was the son of King Solomon and king of Judah for 17 years, from 931 to 913 BC. Because Solomon had turned away from God, Yahweh told Solomon that he would tear the kingdom from him, yet leave him 1 tribe. God also promised for the sake of David not to tear the kingdom away during Solomon's lifetime, but during that of his son. We can read this story in 1 Kings chapter 11, starting with verse 9. It says, Yahweh was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned away from Yahweh, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice and had commanded him concerning this thing that he should not go after other gods, but he didn't keep what Yahweh commanded. Therefore Yahweh said to Solomon, Because this is done by you, and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes that I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you and will give it to your servant. Notwithstanding, I will not do it in your days for David your father's sake, but I will tear it out of the hand of your son. However, I will not tear away all the kingdom, but I will give one tribe to your son for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake that I have chosen." Shortly after Rehoboam the son of Solomon became king, a rebellion placed the 10-tribe northern kingdoms under the rule of Jeroboam, and left Rehoboam with his own tribe Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. Jeroboam started out as a servant of Solomon in charge of forced labor. You read that account in 1 Kings 11. The prophet Ahijah foretold that Jeroboam would rule over the 10 tribes of Israel in the north. Let's read this account in 1 Kings 11, verse 29. "It came to pass at that time, when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, that the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite found him in the way. Now Ahijah had clad himself with a new garment, and the two were alone in the field. Ahijah laid hold of the new garment that was on him and tore it into 12 pieces. He said to Jeroboam, 'Take 10 pieces, for this is what Yahweh the God of Israel says. Behold, I will tear the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give the 10 tribes to you. But he will have one tribe for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, the city that I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel.'" Now notice why God was doing this. Verse 33. "Because that they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of Moab, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon. They have not walked in my ways to do what is right in my eyes, and to keep my statutes and my ordinances, as David his father did. However, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him leader all the days of his life, for David my servant's sake, whom I chose, who kept my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand, and I will give it to you, even 10 tribes. To his son I will give one tribe, that David my servant may have a lamp always before me in Jerusalem, the city that I have chosen me to put my name there. I will take you, and you will reign according to all that your soul desires, and will be king over Israel. It will be, if you listen to all that I command you, and will walk in my ways, and do what is right in my eyes, keep my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did, that I will be with you, and will build you a sure house, as I built for David, and will give Israel to you. I will for this afflict the seed of David, but not forever." Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam. But Jeroboam arose and fled into Egypt, to Shishak, king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. So we can see from these verses that Solomon's son Rehoboam was a vain and foolish man. But Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor. He warned Rehoboam not to make the same mistake his father had made by taxing them heavily to finance a luxurious lifestyle. Rehoboam defied the advice to lighten the yoke of oppression, and Rehoboam told Jeroboam, "My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." The people responded to Rehoboam's harshness by rebelling against the new king and making Jeroboam king over Israel. That's in 1 Kings chapter 12. It says, "So the king didn't listen to the people, for it was a thing brought about of Yahweh, that he might establish his word, that Yahweh spoke by Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat." When all Israel saw that the king didn't listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, "What portion have we in David? Neither do we have an inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, Israel. Now see to your own house, David." So Israel departed to their tents. But as for the children of Israel, who lived in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. So we can see that Yahweh's words came true as always, and so Israel became divided. Rehoboam didn't like what happened at all, so he called together his army to go fight against Jeroboam. But note what happened here. Verse 21, "When Rehoboam came to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 chosen men who were warriors, to fight against the house of Israel, to bring the kingdom again to Rehoboam the son of Solomon. But the word of God came to Shemaiah the man of God, saying, Speak to Rehoboam the son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to all the house of Judah and Benjamin, and to the rest of the people, saying, "This is what Yahweh says, you are not to go up nor fight against your brothers, the children of Israel. Every one return to his house, for this thing is of me." So they listened to the word of Yahweh and returned and went their way according to the word of Yahweh. So King Rehoboam returned to the capital of Jerusalem and ruled over Judah and Benjamin, while Jeroboam reigned from Samaria over the 10 tribes. Once established in the northern kingdom, King Jeroboam feared that if the people traveled to the temple in Jerusalem to worship, that they might return to Rehoboam. So he set up centers of worship in Bethel and Dan, building golden calves, and telling people, "It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." So Jeroboam made shrines on the high places, installed priests who were not of the tribe of Levi, appointed a festival, and sacrificed at their altars. In spite of God's offer to establish his dynasty in Israel, Jeroboam chose idolatry, and the prophet Ahijah told Jeroboam that his family would not endure. As Jeroboam was turning people away from God in the northern kingdom, Rehoboam was turning people away from God in the southern kingdom of Judah and Benjamin. Rehoboam reigned in Jerusalem for 17 years, but he did evil because he had not set his heart on seeking Yahweh, as 2 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 14 says. After Rehoboam, there were good kings and bad kings over Judah. Every other generation or so, a great king stepped forward and turned the people back to the true God. That never happened among the kings of the northern kingdom in Samaria. They all followed the mold of Jeroboam, and Jeroboam reigned over the 10 tribes of Israel for 22 years and was succeeded by his son Nadab. But then Nadab was murdered after 2 years on the throne, and the assassin killed all of Jeroboam's family, fulfilling Ahijah's prophecy. The story is mentioned in 1 Kings 15. Here it says, "Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, became king over Israel in the 2nd year of Asa, king of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. He did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh and walked in the way of his father, and in his sin which he had made Israel to sin. Baasha, the son of Ahijah, the house of Issachar, conspired against him, and Baasha struck him at Gibeathon, which belonged to the Philistines. For Nadab and all Israel were laying siege to Gibeathon. Even in the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, Baasha killed him and reigned in his place. It came to pass that as soon as he was king, he struck all the house of Jeroboam. He didn't leave to Jeroboam any who breathed until he had destroyed him, according to the saying of Yahweh that he spoke by his servant Ahijah the Shilonite, for the sins of Jeroboam which he sinned, with which he made Israel to sin, because of his provocation with which he provoked Yahweh the God of Israel to anger." All subsequent monarchs of the 10-tribe northern kingdom of Israel followed Jeroboam's lead. Not one of them was faithful to the God of Israel. The schism that occurred during the days of Rehoboam and Jeroboam was the end of a united Israel. This division continued during their reigns. There was continual warfare between Rehoboam and Jeroboam, and for centuries afterward. So Israel was from then on a divided nation, all because of idolatry and disobedience to God. So the 2 tribes in the southern kingdom were Judah and Benjamin, and the 10 tribes in the north were Reuben, Simeon, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Manasseh, and Ephraim. King Jeroboam led the northern kingdom of Samaria into sin, along with all the rulers that succeeded him. Due to their wickedness, Yahweh allowed Tiglath-Pileser III, see a picture of him here, and also Shalmaneser V, king of Assyria, to take the 10 tribes of Israel into captivity during the time of King Hoshea, who was the last king of the 10 tribes. That story is mentioned in 2 Kings, the 17th chapter. In 733 BC, Tiglath-Pileser III of Assyria invaded Israel and captured Galilee. And in 724 BC, King Shalmaneser V of Assyria laid siege to Samaria, and Israel fell to the Assyrians 2 years later in 722 BC. Assyria continued to harass the southern kingdom of Judah after the fall of the northern kingdom in 722. Most people believe that this was the end of the northern kingdom's history. Yahweh allowed the destruction of Samaria, the 10-tribe kingdom, to happen because of the wicked kings who ruled in Israel. Here's a list of the kings from both tribes. There were 42 kings who ruled in Israel and Judah, and one queen, Queen Athaliah, who ruled in the 2-tribe kingdom of Judah. Of these, 15 were killed by other people. God killed 3, and 2 killed themselves. Interestingly, of the 19 kings of Israel, 7 were murdered by individuals who wanted to take the place of the kings. However, these murders only happened in Samaria, not in Judah. Queen Athaliah is the only woman in the Hebrew Bible reported as having reigned as a monarch within the southern kingdom of Israel, Judah. She was the daughter of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. They are both very wicked. Athaliah married King Jehoram of Judah. After Jehoram's death, their son Ahaziah reigned for 1 year, and his mother was his counselor in doing wickedly. After Ahaziah is killed in a dynastic struggle mentioned in 2 Kings, Queen Athaliah sets out to kill the rest of the royal dynasty and seizes the throne of Judah in Jerusalem. You can read these accounts in 2 Kings chapter 9 and 2 Chronicles chapter 22. So Queen Athaliah manages to remain sole monarch for 6 years, and in the 7th year, a revolution was led by Jehoiada the priest. The overthrow takes place in the Jerusalem temple. Queen Athaliah is killed in what she terms treason against her reign. So Judah's only queen, Athaliah, was wicked in God's eyes, as shown in 2 Kings chapter 11, 1 Chronicles, especially 24, because she supported Baal worship and was a murderer. She tried to destroy the lineage leading to Christ by murdering anyone that would inherit the throne in Judah. So she was especially wicked. And obviously Satan was using her to try to accomplish his ends. Here's a list of all the kings in the northern kingdom of Samaria. Notice that there was not one good ruler. It starts out with Jeroboam. He was rebellious. Nadab was bad. Baasha was wicked. Elah was evil. Zimri was sinful. Tibni was iniquitous. Omri was extra bad. Ahab was the worst to that point. Ahaziah, disobedient. Jehoram, mostly rotten. Jehu, not good, but better than the rest. Jehoaz, non-compliant. Joash, wayward. Jeroboam II, badly behaved. Zechariah, Shallum, Menahem, Pekahiah, Pekah, Hoshea, who was the last king of Samaria. It's just incredibly hard to believe, really, that there is not one king in the 10-tribe kingdom of Samaria who was faithful to God. Even in Judah, the southern kingdom, almost all of the kings were wicked also, but there were some good ones. Note the list here of these kings. Rehoboam, he was mostly bad. Abijah, mostly bad. Asa was a good king. Jehoshaphat was a righteous king. Jehoram or Joram was terrible. Ahaziah was bad. Athaliah, we talked about her. She was very wicked. Joash or Jehoash was mostly virtuous, so he was another good king. Amaziah, mostly good. Uzziah or Azariah was good. Jotham was worthy. Ahaz was very wicked. Hezekiah was mentioned as being the best of all of them. King Manasseh was very wicked, but he repented at the end, and amazingly God forgave him. That's an interesting story to read. Amen was treacherous. Josiah was great, and the rest of them were wicked. The kings and one queen of Judah, of the 2-tribe kingdom in the south, didn't do too much better. But we have King Asa, King Jehoshaphat, King Jehoash, King Amaziah, King Azariah, King Jotham, and King Hezekiah, and then finally King Josiah. He was known as a great king. Just these men, only 8 kings were worthy out of 42 kings and 1 queen. No wonder God finally abandoned his people in 586-87 to the Babylonians. Most of the rulers of Israel led the people into serious idolatry against God, and Yahweh always used the surrounding pagan nations to punish his people when they went astray. After the Jews spent many years in captivity to Babylon, they were finally released when King Cyrus conquered Babylon in one night. The Jews were allowed to return to their homeland in Jerusalem, but the nation of Israel was never the same again. Their wicked practice of idolatry and disobedience to God came at great cost to the nation. The lesson we today can learn about this story is that God is not one to be mocked. If you practice sin such as idolatry or any other serious sin, God will hold you accountable, just like he did the nation of Israel. We can lose our good standing with God if we are not careful to walk according to his commandments. The popular concept going around in Christendom, once saved, always saved, is a lie. The Christian can lose out on his reward of eternal life if not careful to obey all of God's commandments. So don't believe that once saved, always saved. That's just not true. The Bible doesn't support it. The Bible is very clear that a Christian can be lopped off the tree of life by sinning, by not being faithful to the end, which means the end of our life. Okay, I'm going to end this video here. In the next video on this series on idolatry, I will discuss how wicked some of the rulers of Israel were, such as King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, in more detail. Finally, I will discuss how modern-day idolatry can affect Christians in modern times. So stay tuned for that, and thanks very much for watching.